we're going to jump right in. We have a lot of people joining us today. And so it's really good to see everybody. Welcome to 2022. There's just so much energy and so much good nature and good spirit. And people are just ready to jump into new work, make edits and adjustments as needed. And so we're all just doing, the best we can on one hand, but also being innovative and creative and excited on the other hand. So being able to come together is great. So last year, Kim and I decided that, people kept saying we don't get to see each other and we want to be reminded of best practices and we want to hear from people that are doing meaningful work. And so we're just like, let's just start an quarterly event for anybody interested in the culture change movement and person-centered, person-directed care. And for all the almost 1,000 people in the state of Georgia that have their EDEN Associate certification, just to kind of keep everybody. So we said EDEN Associates and friends. So anybody is welcome. And so we're really good. Do you want to change the slide? Are you okay?
Hold on.
We've changed role. We're in the process of changing roles. So anyway, we want to welcome everybody. I especially want to welcome some of our colleagues from Spain. We now have 5, besides David and I, we have 5 individuals that are leaders in this country in person-centered and person-directed care that have gotten their certification, and we quickly made them ambassadors for EDEN Alternative Spain, and 3 of them are with us today, Josep, Anna, and Josefa. And so we especially, I want to, while you can see Josep, I want to just personally thank him for connecting us, for letting us join him as colleagues in this venture. And also, we're just getting ready in March to offer the first online certification for EDEN Associates in this country. And so, Josep, I just want to thank you for supporting us in that and for being open to letting that filter through Info Residencias and just your incredible leadership. So thank you.
Thank you. I second that as well.
So anyway, let's move on. Let's get right to Deke, because I know some people hopped out of meetings and some people are going to others. Last time we met in November, we heard from the Oaks at Hampton, an assisted living community, and it was fantastic. So if you didn't see that, we'll have the recording on the website. But we heard from every care partner that are touching the lives of people at the Oaks at Hampton, and they've been a real leader in our state.
We got to also hear from a lot of the residents and meet a lot of the animals too, right?
Yeah. So it was a great overview. Today, we're going to go ahead and jump in with Deke. We had a long conversation with Deke in our August event. And since then, his book has come out, The Brush Fire, and he's going to tell us more about himself and why he wrote it and about his journey and what he really wants us to know. So, and Jennifer Kraft Morgan is on to help Kim and I ask a few initial questions. But first of all, Deke, you're our shining star. We have so much going on in Georgia, so many people doing awesome things. And we thank you for your leadership and your commitment, and also you're willing just to share your journey and your transparency for it all. So let's turn it over to you, and you may have some opening comments, but try to let us know who you are and what you've done for people that don't know you.
And I think I'll stop sharing the screen now so we can see a big picture of you, Deke.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Kim. So many friendly faces. I like a good clergy person. It definitely feels comfortable be here, speaking to the choir, so to speak. Bienvenidos a mis amigos de España. Welcome to all of those who are joining us from Spain as well. My name is Deke Cateau. I'm the CEO of A.G. Rhodes. And I first would start by also saying very, very importantly to this group, I also have the pleasure of serving on the EDEN Alternative Board. So also bring you guys some best wishes on behalf of the EDEN Alternative Board. I see Kathy, I see Chris, I see some other individuals on as well. So great to see you all. What can I say? EDEN Alternative is so important to me. It's been a transformational journey, not just for my organization, which I have been proud to lead. But I know Walter and Kim and some others would tell you guys professionally, I think EDEN has really helped me, it's really buttressed me. It's changed my views on this industry. It's so crazy when I think about where my views were 10 years ago. Even further than that, but 10 years ago, my views were completely different about aging than they are now. And a lot of that I credit to EDEN. I'm happy to be here, talk a little bit about the book that I recently released, Brush Fire. And it is about our journey in the nursing home industry, which kind of parallels senior living on the whole, but our journey through COVID. I just thought it was so important that we chronicle this. I'm very happy and very proud to have been able to release this and to be getting such good reviews from people who have read it. And that's my introduction. Walter, Kim, I'll leave it up to you guys to start structuring this.
Oh, well, I think maybe just a little bit more about your background,
yeah.
Some of your pathway to get to where you are, because we have a lot of people that are interested in leadership development and people's journeys as well. And yours is so interesting. That would be great.
Well, I'll start with, I guess, the obvious, the elephant in the room. You all can hear from this beautiful accent that I have that I am from the South, literally from the South Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, is where I was born. So very proud to be a Trini. And my journey into long-term care really is kind of coincidental. My wife was a dietitian. She was a dietitian in long-term care. And she's the one that introduced me to the field first. So I thank her, Kia, for that, as well as many other things. But she always thought I would be good in the industry. And through an opportune set of circumstances, I left one job and went to pick her up from work and tell her that I just left this job that I had in the financial sector. Tell her the bad news that we were going to have one income for a while, but I couldn't take it any longer. And ended up picking her up from her job and hanging out at her job, which was a nursing home in Marietta, Autumn Breeze Healthcare. And just in chatting with her and her staff, I was offered a job that same afternoon.
Wow.
And yep, so here we are 22, maybe 23 years later. I'm the CEO of A.G. Rhodes. I started off in human resources and payroll, actually in that same little nursing home. And that moved into a great opportunity to get involved as a administrator in training, and then as the assistant administrator there, then a few positions in our corporate office. Then I was given my first home as an administrator, which was right here in Georgia, College Park Healthcare. So wide experience there. I ran a CCRC in Savannah for a while. I was the regional manager for our Georgia homes in that company, 5-Star Quality Care, for a while. And in 2009, I accepted a position as administrator at our A.G. Rhodes Atlanta flagship location. And from there, the rest really started to take off. I served there for about 7 years, and then had small tenures as chief operating officer of the organization, as chief of strategy for the organization. And ultimately in 2018 as the CEO of A.G. Rhodes. So sounds pretty meteoric, but the one thing I would let particularly those newer to the industry know, it was not as it sounds. It took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of me bettering myself as an individual, bettering myself as a leader. It took a lot of me educating myself. So a lot of hard work went into that. I'm very proud now to be here as the product of all of that.
That's great. There's some EDEN staff on this call, and they worked really hard with us in the state of Georgia for us to develop a new model when we started the culture change movement back in 2008. Is that right?
Yeah.
You know, we wanted to include people from all settings and all backgrounds. And so we want, you know, older Georgians to have a better quality of life no matter where they live. And it was kind of a new, and the EDEN staff have been so supportive of our journey. And so we want to go ahead and thank you for that. But that's how Deke and I started spending more time together when I was at Leading Age Georgia, and he was an administrator at A.G. Rhodes in Atlanta. And I probably came by to get you to pay your dues or something, Deke. Yeah. And, you know, and then we met each other and the rest is history. But one of the things that we were able to do was to bring through a grant was to bring the Dementia Beyond Drugs certification. And a lot of us went down to Macon, Georgia, and we were there in this huge room, and even CMS staff, Stephanie Davis, came and sat on the front row the whole time, and some of her colleagues, and Deke was there. And I remember standing in the back of the room, and Deke, you said, I've been, you know, working with people living with dementia and their families, and I've had these certifications, but this is like the best thing ever because it's so person-centered. Yeah. So where did all this, how did your involvement, and when did you start really focusing more on the culture change movement and looking at things from a different perspective, more person-centered, more person-directed? How did that work?
Yeah, right about that time. It was probably 2010, probably 2009, 2010, that I actually was in my first EDEN alternative class. It was actually a foundation that supports A.G. Rhodes sent me to the class. And Walter, you, Kim, of course, were involved in teaching that class. And I, like so many, got my aha moment during that class. And my moment came towards the end of the class when I was paired up with a group, two of which were CNAs, and we were told to present on how we would take this wonderful concept that we got and take it back to our nursing homes and make change. And the two CNAs in particular in my group were so into it and so involved and so enthusiastic. And they had a list of things they were going to do. They were going to go back and have trainings. They were going to do all of these great stuff. And me as an administrator was extremely skeptical because I looked at the enthusiasm that these individuals had. And I said to myself, there is no way you're going to go back to your nursing home and think you're going to be having in-services and think you're going to be affecting change like that with the institutional nature of nursing homes today. And with the reality that if you do not have the backing from the management, the leadership, the corporate entity, the fiduciary entity of the organization, this would probably come to naught. And that's when I kind of knew that for me to take that passion and that drive and that enthusiasm, that aha, and not let it just stay there and be something we talk about and leave. I had to go back and try to institutionalize that in what I do at A.G. Rhodes. And that was a huge part of it. I was very fortunate also to have made an early trip to the Netherlands as part of my organization's movement into, it wasn't person-directed care, but it was us looking for a better way of caring for individuals. And we heard about a model that existed in the Netherlands, so we went there and I saw in the Netherlands, ironically not in the model we went to look at. We went to look at a place called the Hoek of A, which is not actually what influenced me. But in so many of the other nursing homes that we went to, I saw what is purely, authentically a culture of person-centeredness, a culture of person-directedness, a culture of volunteership that just blew me away. And was fortunate again to work for an organization that gave me the opportunity in a strategic role to bring that to our A.G. Rhodes nursing homes.
Wow. So I know we want to get into the book a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Jen to talk more about that. And I just finished it this week. I ordered it, and we couldn't find it, but we've read it. We love it. And it's very comprehensive. I mean, you really shared a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you were willing to do that. And it was pretty brave.
Yeah.
And but before Kim and Jen, why'd you write the book?
The single most drive behind the book was me as a leader through COVID, which for us really started in March of 2020. For me, I knew it was coming back in February of 2020, and I knew what it would do to nursing homes. And seeing what my team went through or was going through, hearing them every day, looking to me and to our senior team, our support team for support, and us not being able to support them really in the ways we would want to support them, because this thing was like a freight train and it was going very, very quickly. And I've primarily wanted to be a voice for them. Wanted this book to get that message across as to what nursing homes, what senior living deals with every day, and how misunderstood an industry this is, with all the vilification on every day on the news. It was the press. One of the other drivers very early on, our Atlanta home, which is near and dear to me because I ran it for so long, was part of a negative article. It was a national article, and that article pointed to a correlation between infection control deficiencies in annual surveys and COVID. And that Atlanta home at the time actually, and this was deep within it, had 0 cases of COVID, yet they were negatively featured in that article. So to me, it was like, where is the correlation? And a big part of this book was exactly that, Walt. It was me trying, wanting to detail what we went through. It's ironic that you say there's a lot in it, because if anything, to many, that's, sort of a deficiency of it. And the first publisher, the publisher actually approached me about it, literally tried to change it. And they said, hey, you have several books here. You need to go down this alley. Infection control, you need to go down that alley. And I knew immediately, no, this is my book. I wanted to tell this story. And there were so many threads that ran through it. So in that sense, it's sort of a memoir, because it's me, forgetting all the custom that should be put into a book, and really letting my voice be heard. And by that, telling the voice of all of us in this industry, all of us on this call, all of my staff, who I know went through such a ridiculous experience, which I would have never thought over 2 years ago we would still actually be going through and living through today.
Yeah, awesome. So Kim and Jen, while they're kind of asking you some questions, maybe if you have some, you're out there, they may be answered in some of the questions, but maybe if you want to put them in the chat box, then we can kind of see if we can pull some of them, because I think we'll have time. So go ahead.
I just want to first say, I read the book when I started it. I kind of stayed up all and through the night until I finished it. I couldn't stop. And then I learned, and of course I wrote all in it, Deke. You know how I highlight and write and stuff. And then I loaned it to Jen.
And she couldn't read anything because
I'd written all in it, right? And I've even ordered another one so that I have a clean copy. But yeah, see, Jen's holding up my book. I'm gonna let her start because she might have to drop off early. So I also want to say that Jen is going to have her class read it. So Jen, when you start, introduce yourself for anybody that hasn't yet met you.
Sure. I'm Jen Kraft Morgan. I'm at the Gerontology Institute at Georgia State. I'm interim director and associate professor there. I'm excited to have my class read this book, Deke. My first question is a selfish question. As a fellow writer, how in the world, in the middle of all of this, did you write this book?
Firstly, it feels so good to be called a fellow writer, right? Because That's kind of not how I would describe myself. So that is the question that most people ask me. And I could say in front of this room, because we're friends in this room, it was either me write this book or me become an alcoholic. I, like many during that COVID period, was a insomniac. I could not sleep. My mind just kept buzzing. We would have a call every day, a call of our senior management, our support team. And we would discuss everything from supplies, numbers of COVID, what do we report, what don't we report, which families, everything. So it was just like overexposure. And you get home in the afternoon, and that's all that's on your mind, COVID. So I could not sleep. I was actually seeking professional help. I had a counselor for about a year, helping me to meditate, helping me to do things to sleep. And the book actually was that. It helped me. At first I just started jotting down ideas, jotting down thoughts about it. And by doing that, I started writing. And as I started writing, I got closer and closer. And then I really wanted to finish it, right? Because I'm like, I'm getting there. So it was that or becoming a raving alcoholic. And I'm glad I chose the former.
I'm very glad you did. It's a great book. So, thank you, Deke. I guess my second question is, we know in our hearts, and this group specifically, that person-centered care helps you get through this time, right? So that if you have a culture of person-centered or person-directed care, it helps you get through. And that's where you had lots of examples, but I wanted more. I wanted more about what is it you think that helped protect you and helped things go a little bit better for you than they did for others through this crisis.
Yeah, and those who know me know when I speak up, I'm speaking as I'm trying not to be kumbaya-ish when I speak, because I'm speaking knowing the realities of our industry. The first thing I would say from the start that person-directed care brought to us as an organization, which gave us a benefit, was the trust of families, which was huge in an environment where we cut families off. And A.G. Rhodes cut families off early. We were among the earliest to do it because we saw what was happening from an infectious disease standpoint. But having the trust of so many families literally kept complaints down. It's so many families expressed to us their trust and their support of us. And what person-directed care brought in that was our staff became surrogate families, which I don't think would have happened prior to person-directed care. They were able to become surrogate families because they knew the residents. They knew the residents intimately. They knew their likes. They knew their dislikes. They knew what time of the day they might want to call their daughter or their son or their aunt or their niece or their nephew. So I would say that part was huge. Secondly, and Walter alluded to some CMS work that we did related to person-directed care. We had involved technology really early on in our person-directed care journey. IN2L, we were first in the state. I boast the folks when they talk about IN2L. No assisted living, no CCRC, none of them had it before A.G. Rhodes. Our two devices are named Wally and Jane. We named our devices really early on. So that was the mode of communication. We were very comfortable using those devices. And anyone that knows IN2L, Simple C is another technology that our COB home used on even prior to COVID, on all our residents living with dementia. So those were immediate means of communication. The other thing that I would say from a leadership standpoint that made all the difference, this also helped with families' comfort level, is that we were very cautious in our interpretation of regulations related to COVID to ensure that the rights of the resident were preserved during that. So a lot of these very strict regulations and guidelines, we use a lot of common sense with it, because at the end of the day, both the regulators and us want the better quality of life for residents. So that was huge right off the back. And when we had these daily calls, and we would say, but the regulation says this, we would think of ways that we could take that or push that to that extent. The other huge thing that person directed care did for us, and I write a lot about it in the book, is that concept of truth, transparency, trust, which again, I'm a practical guy. I was certainly not someone who 10 years ago was preaching that in the nursing home, because we've been taught in the nursing home to insulate, because it's such there's so many stigmas in this business. There's so much negative with it. So we naturally insulate. We don't open ourselves out to the public. Well, we had started opening ourselves in a long time before that. So when COVID started, we were already there. Hey, we shared our information. There's no shame in it. I just had a call before this about I'll over-report COVID numbers if I need to. There's no shame in that. We are trying, to get to the bottom of a very, very difficult situation. So I think that lent that truth and transparency lent to trust of all our stakeholders. And I mean board members, I mean public, I mean the media as a whole were embraced us because of that attitude of transparency. And I think person-directed care brought every one of these things to the organization to a greater extent, right? Not that some of those things did not already exist in the ethos of the organization, but to a greater extent. The last thing I would say, when I speak about technology, I also should talk about programming. So through person-directed care, we had two very essential programs, and I call them programs on steroids, our music therapy program and our horticulture therapy program, which we purchased hook, line, and sinker from Emory. But the professionalism that those programs brought to it, with a professional horticulture therapist, professional music therapist, we were able to easily morph those programs into in-house programs, smaller group programs, and it just added variety and spontaneity to some extent to what we do.
And Jen, I'm going to jump in. So Deke, I don't know really how much you've said this yet. Like when you learned about the EDEN Alternative and person-directed care, like you brought it back, and all of your homes have gone through this type of education and are actually on the EDEN registry. So if you could just kind of, for people who might not know what that looks like and how, how that was a part of preparing.
Yeah, so I'll preface that by saying, I've known about the EDEN Alternative for way before A.G. Rhodes, way before any of this, and really I saw it as a unrealistic kumbaya program. That's what I grew up knowing as that. It was real nice to read in books about the EDEN Alternative. Bill Thomas was a great guy in the book, real guy, great guy. But for me, steeped in this institutional, surveys, deficiency-free surveys, trying to get there, it was impossible to get there. When I had that aha moment, and when I was given that opportunity to bring this to A.G. Rhodes, we were very strategic in how we rolled it out. We chose our Cobb location, and not that that location was any better than the three of them, but there were certain things organically that, to me, especially with my views on EDEN, that to me worked well there, and they did very well organically. One was pets, right? And I'm not a pet person, but you go into that Cobb home and there's always some big dog running around and someone, slobbering over you and something. And they actually were led then by a social worker, was the administrator, who had a strong, I would say, resident-centered aim and purpose and background in what she did. So those things for me were very organic there. And learning what I learned about EDEN, and this turned out to be correct, we thought we could get a jump start there with certain things because of that organic nature of what was happening there. And then the other thing we were able to do there is learn from the mistakes, right? There's a lot of things we did there that we knew would not work in Atlanta, in a city home, metropolitan areas, more staffing challenges than Cobb. And likewise, when we rolled it to our Wesley Woods community as well, hospital-based nursing home, in a hospital, bunch of lab coats going around, part of a superstructure that we really have no control over. So we need to be wise in that rollout. So it was a lot of thought and method to our madness with rolling it out. And then the board aspect that I told you, the governing body aspect, that was the first thing we did. The first thing we did was to preach this to our board, to sell our board on it, because that's how we got a budget to do a lot of this stuff. And some of it was selfish, right? Our board initially got into this, one, of course, to change the culture of what we were doing and find a better way of nursing home care. But the other part of that was the business case, is we wanted to distinguish ourselves within the state, within the country, by doing so.
That's great.
I do see two questions. Well, a question here from David in the chat.
Yes.
Hey, David. So David said I wrote about vaccine hesitancy among staff. How has that since changed? And that's a great question. It's changed a lot, David. When I finished writing, the vaccine was not quite ready when I finished writing. And my thoughts while writing was just about how politicized vaccination had become. And they're still politicized, but back then those were all my thoughts. And my views on the vaccine being kind of one of the keys to nursing home was nowhere near as strong as they are now. When we got the vaccines in nursing homes in December, and A.G. Rhodes was among the first in the state. I think we were the third group in the state to get the vaccines. We went from total outbreaks and total chaos in all three of our homes to within a month and a half having 0 cases in all three of our homes. So as a leader with views like many other people about vaccines, this was evidence for me. This was evidence for me of the efficacy of the vaccine. So my views since we A.G. Rhodes mandated the vaccine effective October 1st. My views since, I just have to be honest, is much more pro-vaccine. Even now with what we've seen now with Omicron and these latest cases, it's been a lot easier for us to handle. And again, I can only point to the vaccine for that. So even with my friends and family, when we get into these vaccine, I call them conversations because they're not arguments, pro and for. You know, I passionately tell them, you can't argue that with me. I know what I saw in the nursing home. I know we went from 250 cases and 25 deaths. One of those deaths was a staff member who was a close personal friend of mine. We went from that to having no cases, to ultimate chaos, to me almost becoming an alcoholic, right? To get that done. So great question, David. I think my views on behalf of our residents, right? My personal view is different, but I have a moral and ethical obligation to the 418 residents under our care. And it was plain as day for me from that perspective.
Deke, one of the things I just wanted to jump in and tie to that is I love that you said that you were equally determined to make a difference in the lives of your Black and Brown colleagues, you know, care partners. And that's powerful. Is there anything more to say about to help us understand?
Yeah, so I have a chapter in the book called Double Pandemic. So I'm Black, right? You could look at me and see that, right? I'm also a immigrant. You could listen to me and hear that. One of the things COVID did to me is it gave me a voice on matters of race, which I had heretofore stayed away from, some for personal, professional reasons, others for reasons of, you know, I said I'm an immigrant, I'm not from the United States, and I'm like, let me stay out of their racial issues. But COVID gave me that voice. It actually started with a staff member, and this was Black during a lot of the riots in Atlanta, the Black Lives Matter movement, and a staff member, she might be on this call, Sherelle Barber. She gave me a call and she expressed to me how a lot of the staff in that Atlanta home that brought me up in this industry, how frustrated they were, not with A.G. Rhodes, because I was the Black leader of A.G. Rhodes, but with what's happening in society related to minorities, and feeling that they did not have a voice. You know, her exact words was they wanted, you know, should they wear Black Lives Matter shirts to work? Could they wear Black Lives Matter shirts to work? I'm someone that don't play with the dress with the dress code. So these were conflicting thoughts that she had, and I listened to her, but I knew immediately then that me being a Black CEO in an industry that, let's just be real, does not have this, all right, at all. That if I were not going to have a strong voice on it, and not just a voice, but by my actions, you know, what I stand for and what I stood up for, if I wasn't going to have a voice, who was going to have a voice? So for those of you who don't know, and in the Atlanta area, and like in most metropolitan areas, you know, the vast majority of our direct care staff are minorities. We have huge intones, again, of immigrants, immigration, and stuff like that. And our senior leadership, and I'm looking at this, at the folks here now on this first slide, and it tells that story too. The second group I can't see because their faces are away, right? But I bet it's going to look the same way. So that's really emboldened me in that. And again, I'm going to keep thanking my board, because boy, did I have a lily white board. And they have allowed me to do a lot of what I've been doing nationwide now, talking up against race and against the obvious, which we seem to like to ignore as an industry.
Deke, the chapter about the double pandemic is tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so helpful to help the lily white industry see and understand and learn how to think differently. And I'll add that a while back, we did a whole wonderful interview with Deke, and it was really about race and diversity. And we'll have a recording of that, and we'll be putting it up on the website eventually. So everybody will be able to take the time and listen to that as well. Jen, I'm going to turn it back to you. You had to jump off.
I did. I was having technical difficulties. My question was right along with Walter's question, more of a comment. I feel like your work on diversity, equity, inclusion in this book is really to be praised, and that also the other side that you might not have talked about, and you didn't talk about as much in the book, but it was clear in tone, was for staff and frontline staff, and how important and compassionate you were for them. And even in your vaccine hesitancy places where you're talking about, you know, I really just want everybody to be vaccinated. This really just needs to move forward. You were really compassionate and understanding, and helped bring a voice for those frontline workers. And so I guess my next question is, with the DEI initiatives that you're doing and the great work that you've done with your board, what's next? What's next in terms of your staff, and what are some of the national things that you're doing to support frontline workers?
Yeah, first, as we speak of the frontline workers, and this is something that I think was the ethos of A.G. Rhodes well before me. I think it's one of those things that I tried to practice well before COVID. So when we talk about them being essential, I mean, you preach into the choir. They have always been essential. I am thankful that COVID certainly put that under the spotlight. The pay inequities are a great issue that we have to deal with as an industry. We immediately after COVID as an organization tried to deal with some of this. We're not quite there yet, but we immediately tried to do something about this. Just how we treat our staff, how we value our staff. And, you know, if we have any younger managers or leaders on this call, trust me, you are absolutely nothing without your staff, your direct care staff. And if you do not realize that, this is not a threat, but if you don't realize that, you will be absolutely nothing. We have to change. You've heard me say this a million times, Kim, before COVID. We have to change this lesson that we have learned in this industry. We learned in this industry from day one that the resident is always right. And that is not true. And we have for decades done our caregivers a huge disservice. Tim and I were on a call talking about that yesterday, I think. We've done them a disservice. Let's change that perception and change it now. No one is always right. Residents are wrong a lot of the time, especially when we put in cognitive issues and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter who is right? What matters is we do the right thing by individuals. As far as the other part of that question about some of what's being done, A.G. Rhodes is doing a lot. We have an awesome leadership management program aimed at minorities that we just graduated our first cohort of. I have been really blessed in some of the work I do with Leading Age National to lead their initiatives on race and equity in terms of their pipeline initiatives. So I've been working with United Negro College Fund and HBCUs, which this is something huge that's going to be rolled out soon. That's going to make a national, if not international, impact. So you'll hear more about that from the Leading Age front. But those are just the tangible things that we need to do. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to say it's going to come down to our actions. Sad that, again, we're preaching to the choir here. This is probably the group that recognizes all of this. But as an industry, we have so many inequities in pay scale and structures, inequities in how the buildings are designed. Let me ask anyone on this call who's worked in a traditional nursing home, which I've done all my career. And I'll be honest, I have yet to find a traditional nursing home, even those built up until the 2000s, that was built with a staff break room. Now, I do know a few where a wise administrator turned some kind of room into a small staff break room, but they haven't been built with one. I don't know of any that I've worked in. I'm just going to be real with you all. So we've used the staff as an afterthought in everything, in our design and in our practice. And that has to change if we're going to go anywhere as an industry.
That's awesome. And I'm going to throw out, Deke, you often use the phrase that the staff are your secret sauce. Mm-hmm. And it's so wonderful to hear the respect and admiration and compassion that you have for everybody. And you exemplify that in everything that you do.
And that is not to think that I or anyone should be a rollover or knockover for staff. Don't get me wrong. Me and my HR director have that all the time. I'm like, I know y'all think I'm some kind of meanie. Because I'm for those that have worked with you, they'll probably tell you I'm actually a pretty strict manager, pretty strict leader. But when I talk about valuing your staff, I talk about knowing your staff. I talk about understanding their issues that they live with. You know, I grew up in this industry terminating people who did not come to work or writing up people who didn't come to work because they had a habit of leaving early at 2 o'clock to go pick their kid up. Well, we'll do it once, we'll do it twice, third time, nah, that's a write-up. Fourth time, second write-up, third time, you terminated, wrong place to live, right? I grew up in this industry pulling applications from people who came to apply for jobs with their baby in their hand. Because the way I was taught growing up in this industry is if you don't have childcare, right? What's gonna happen when you come to workforce? You're gonna be missing work. These are things that I have had to look deeply and realize were absolutely wrong to have done. And we grew up in this industry managing like we didn't allow people to live. And the funny thing that COVID has done now, I bet you could leave work every day at 1 o'clock now if you need to and come back, and ain't no one gonna fire you because we don't have no staff. We need you. We'll take an hour out of you if you could give us an hour a day. So COVID has made us learn flexible staffing, right? Which was one of the most difficult things to do in senior living leadership. COVID has taught us that. So,
Jen?
Are there other questions?
I see, I did see Deborah asked a question about what was the approach to care partners in terms of influencing them to be vaccinated, and did you lose some? So we did, of course, a lot of the incentives, but I would say the biggest thing was education. We did town halls. I went to every home, talking to staff on different shifts, trying to influence them. We took infectious disease doctor with us, Dr. Suchandran, an expert. We tried to get away from all the misnomers. We had a big education that we rolled out to staff from Dr. Jane Morgan, who's an expert out of Piedmont. So it was a lot of education. Yes, we did lose some. We lost about, with small organization, we lost about 7% due to it. And some of those 7% actually came back to work after. And I suspect with the federal mandate, we're going to see some of them back as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm looking, we've talked about the vaccine hesitancy. Rosemary and several others are so excited to read your book. Joan Devine with Pioneer read it and they're ordering it for the Pioneer Network store. Rosemary wants to know if you have an agent and if we're going to see you on talk shows.
You're hired, Rosemary, you're hired. The timing of the book was good and bad. I released it during the Leading Ages National Conference, which was great there. So that was kind of my soft launch. I'll be real honest with what's been going on in the homes. I still have my day job. With what's been going on in the homes, that's been my priority. So I have done very little marketing except what's being done by my publisher. But expect to see more of that. The other thing with this book is I expect it to grow over time. It is not a money-making venture. Every dime of the book goes to my organization's education fund. So I expect this is something that would last over time and not just be a book that sells a bunch, in the first month or two. So I think it's timeless. And if COVID, if the behavior of COVID so far is any indication, it's going to be here for a while, and we're going to get more opportunities. But I encourage that you all to just spread the message about that. If anyone can't afford a book, I am happy to send you one. Again, it's more about us getting that message about and changing the industry in any way we can.
And this, again, for everyone, this is being recorded, and we'll be able to share this recording with everyone so that you can make sure to share it with not just people who work in nursing homes. Yeah. That's something I want to talk about too, Deke. In the beginning, and that you've touched on it, you talked about language. You had to use kind of everyday outside vernacular, not necessarily our culture change language, because the goal is to help the general public understand this and change media perceptions. Do you want to talk a little bit more about media perceptions during COVID?
Yeah, so from the start, we were completely vilified. We do some great work with Leading Age, actually, they have experts that look at media hits nationwide. And of course, you would know when there's a media hit with a nursing home nationwide, it is always negative during COVID. It's always like 90-something% negative hits. So we have to change that. We have to change the perceptions that the public have of us. I will caution that we have to be ready to change it, right? Because some of those perceptions are true perceptions. So we need to make sure that our organizations are ready to change that. But we have to take an onslaught back at the media and back at individuals who villainize them. I was on a call with an AJC reporter yesterday about an article that published today. And my communications director was on with me, but she was trying to get me to say the negative for most of that call, which I would not say. And then that negative was that we could not operate, that our staffing levels were at such a thing now that we don't know about the level of care in our nursing homes. Well, I know about the level of care in my nursing homes. And my point to her was the staffing crisis that we have now, let's be real, we had a staffing crisis before COVID, a huge staffing crisis. Workforce development was the #1 issue on all of our minds. COVID made it worse, but it was always going to hit that bubble. But I say that because, of course, my communications director sends me the article today, and guess who was not quoted in the article? Because I didn't say the negative, and that is a reality of how we exist. The way we have to change that is through communications, is through innovative use of communications. I do not like Facebook. However, we need to get out on there more. We need to use social media to connect people to those good stories in our homes. We need everyone on this call to invite media into their communities at good times, not just at the bad times. And albeit, I'm going to go back to truth, transparency, and trust. You know, bad things happen in nursing homes by nature of what we do. Bad things happen in hospitals by nature of what they do. We need to stop being afraid of you know, being honest about what has happened. Because invariably, we get into a position where we try to tweak the truth a little bit as to what happened. And it always ends up in a worse situation when we do that. So we need to control the narrative, so to speak, by getting out there with it. It happens, right? Hospitals have just as much COVID cases among their staff, yet hospital staff don't have to be tested, right? There's no requirement to test hospital staff. I'm testing my staff every week, right? Those are issues that we have to be honest about dealing with.
Well, and being proactive with the media, being proactive with stories, and developing relationships with the media is really important.
I'll just quickly say, Kim, and I know it's something we have not done traditionally, but it changed the stratosphere for A.G. Rhodes. I think a strong communications director is a position that is as important to our homes, to our organizations, as any other. I think those who don't have it need to look at it. I'm not just saying a PR person. I know some of us partner with PR people, but that narrative needs to be something that's ongoing as an organization. So I think that's a plug for such a great role. My own Mary Newton, who used to be with the organization, still works with us in a consultancy role. My current person, Kim Beasley, has been with the organization in a volunteer role and has morphed into that. But these individuals have helped our message so much that I think it's something we should all look at.
It's really, really important. And you all have done an amazing job with that. I want you to talk now, Deke, if you will, about the people living with dementia during all of this, and what that's been like, and just, I know that has troubled and pained you, and that was part of what was driving you to drink. But it's huge.
Yeah, that's another double pandemic. You know, I'll speak boldly. It's like it's. I think learning to understand them, you know, in some senses is like the minority issue that we have with you know, how trying to imagine how a Black person in certain circumstances feels, like when the cops approach him and stuff like that. Similarly, our individuals living with dementia, I think if we peel back the layers and think about how they feel or have felt or continue to feel being approached by someone with a mask over here, with a gown on, barely wanting to touch them, right? Because we don't want to get COVID. You know, with this sterile environment we've promoted, I think we need to think carefully about that. And not that we have a choice now, but we need to think about the repercussions of that on our residents living with dementia. I think it's a fact now that the majority, the most at risk, I forget the statistic, Cape Western University did some work on that, about the effects of COVID on those living with dementia, and it's really inordinate when you compare it. And I think we need to seriously look at those impacts. They can't verbalize what's happening with them. We have taken away a lot of the personalization that helped us to take care of them through person-directed care.
To be able to communicate.
To be able to communicate with them in that way. I mean, all we have left is the eyes and the touch in how we communicate with those living with dementia. So I think it is something we need to really look at as a nation and as an industry. We need to think deeply about how we can affect their lives for the positive now.
And that's without even having the increases in the use of antipsychotics and psychotropics since everybody's been locked up.
Yeah.
On different calls, a lot of us have talked about different times how part of the good that came from COVID was helping all of us to have a better understanding about loneliness, helplessness, and boredom.
Yeah.
Have you all, I mean, and you talk about that in your book. Can you talk some more about how that played out and how you saw it coming to life?
Yeah, so Robert Kramer, who heads the NIC, who some of you might know, and I met him through the EDEN Alternative, and he's done some work for me since, and he wrote the foreword for my book. I think he puts it well, that one of the positive consequences is that even the youngest among us now understands this concept of loneliness, which, again, in the EDEN Alternative, we've preached loneliness, helplessness, boredom for a long time, right? Well, we just lived, we are living it now. And that's one of the good things to humanity, I think, that the average person understands that. I'll give you a good example. We just went to Jamaica over the Christmas, and my wife and 2 daughters tested positive the day before we returned. And was one very difficult for us, me and my son, to leave them. But then they had to quarantine for 10 days in the hotel. But you would be surprised how grateful they are. And it's strange to me to hear my daughter say that there are worse places they could have been in quarantine for 10 days. And I think it's because they get that loneliness, now. I think that is one of the things that I know the scholars are going to study, the effects of loneliness on our population. I think if you look deeply, there's probably be more deaths because of loneliness than even cases of COVID. But I think the great humanity in it now is that the average person gets that. The average person understands that. Whereas before, I don't think it was understood by individuals who didn't have the empathy for it, because you've never been in that situation. We've all been locked up in houses, throughout COVID. So we get it now.
I want also to have you mention a little bit more about how involved your board was.
Yeah.
Your board was extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you build, how did that happen? How did the board's involvement in such a wonderful way? How can we help other people champion that in their organizations?
Yeah, well, I can't take too much credit as far as building the board to do that. That's not my role. I have a great board chair who works with me in doing that. But I think in the A.G. Rhodes case, a lot of it was that personal touch and that personal influence. My board chair is the great-great-grandson of A.G. Rhodes, right? So he's all in this. He's vested in this. But for me as a leader, what was important, he actually flew into town. He lives in Virginia, flew into town in February, early February, and met with me. Hey, what do you all need? And we're like, yeah, we're doing okay. And then about a week later, he was actually on vacation. And about a week later was a Friday the 13th, when all hell broke loose in the nursing homes. And he said, hey, we need to support you more. I know you may not ask for it, but we need to support you. And that started a weekly call with my board, with my executive committee of my board, weekly. And it was just brainstorming as what ways they can help us. Some of it was financial, of course. Some of it was, hey, I remember talking on the phone with a supplier in China that one of my board members knew someone who had business in China, and they were trying to get us PPE. It didn't work out, but they were trying to get us PPE directly from China. So they used their realms of influence. And probably most importantly, I think just in spreading that word out in the community about advocating for nursing home staff is so important. And I'm happy to have a board that does that. So they advocate as strongly for us as anyone else. They get it. You know, they got real early on when they saw our COVID numbers on our website, the deaths kept ticking up. And they were like, oh my gosh, that was a cause for education. So we had to educate them. I did a graph for them and I showed them the year prior with no COVID, how many deaths we had at this point in the year. And it was actually, we had more then. So they got it. They got the point that nursing homes take care of very sick people and people die in those nursing homes. And a virus as virulent as COVID could kill people in the nursing home. So having them on board, having them as advocates, I think is huge and a huge part of their fiduciary responsibility as well.
You to ask a question about how you've been able to involve the families and family members in activities, group events, like how did all that stuff work? How were you, what did you do with the families?
We so our volunteer program, which was huge before, which involved families, which involved friends, morphed because no one could come into the nursing home. That was one of the first things we shut down, honestly, was the volunteer program. What we did through Kim Beasley, our volunteer coordinator, we offered them opportunities to do craft, to write letters virtually, to send things for the residents, but even more importantly, to send things that the staff needed as well. At a different period during the crisis, we gave them opportunities to bring fruits and other stuff in, and we would have like a day where the staff could come and take home a bag of fruit and a bag of vegetables to their family. So we through technology, we were able to reach some of them, but also again, like that, the Sympathy program I told you all about in COD, allowed families direct access to it. But it's a work in progress. That's probably the biggest. I hate talking about things like this because it sounds like we were business as usual during COVID, and this was everything but business as usual. And quite honestly, families were not able to participate as much as they were able to prior to COVID. And we're still hoping they can go back to those days where they can participate as much as they did before.
But what you were just talking about, Dee, was proof of the fact that y'all had already built such a community and relationships with them that you were, able to get them involved and being champions for the staff.
Yep, totally.
Which is a really big deal.
We in one of the waves, a family member called me. This is a funny story we could segue or end on. A family called me and told me that their mom was turned 94 the day nursing homes were asked to shut down, and she had gotten to the nursing home to visit with her mom, and literally on their way up to the room, they were very unceremoniously turned around and said, hey, this is a national mandate, you have to turn around, which they understood, they got it. So this was like right after the all clear, and they said it was the 95th birthday, so a year later, and they said their only wish, they wanted to go and celebrate the birthday with loved one. We still didn't have in-room visitation. So we set it up, we had an area for them to come down and visit. And then of course, when they got there, well, we want to hug mom too. So it was like, oh my gosh. So I told them, y'all gonna get me in trouble there, because I came to just make sure it happened. And when they were about to, they wanted to hug, the social worker who was supervising said, absolutely not. And just then she had to go upstairs to get something. And it was the funniest thing, because I was like, quick, hug him, hug him, hug him, hug him, hug him, hug him. And they hugged her, and we took a picture. But I was like scared for like 14 days after, because I'm like, oh Lord, right. If this they got COVID now, they're gonna know I allowed this. But that's the reality of what COVID, has done for us. When we have these interactions, we're scared for, well, now it's 5 days, but we're scared for 14 days after this. Let me make sure that something doesn't happen.
Wow, that's a great story. This is a good question here. from NISA. If there were another pandemic, what would you want to have done differently, both by the regulators, government, and the industry itself? I'm going to kind of add to that.
Everything.
What can we do? What can we do going forward?
Yeah.
To help improve life for elders and the people who care for and about them?
Yeah, so we did a lot wrong, and I'll just be honest, the regulators did a lot wrong. But I don't think it's because of COVID. I think that's just because of the fragmented governmental system. We have federal laws, we have state laws, we have local laws. So I know you all have heard about the dichotomy, you know, DPH, CDC, CMS, who do you follow? For us in the regulatory environments, that's the biggest issue, because these three people, in most cases through COVID, had conflicting views about what you do for a lot of the time. So there was no general, direction that we knew. Well, there was a general one, but no specific direction we knew we could take. So I think that for one, I think needs to be done differently. I think somewhere during COVID, some of the they had this great idea with the infection control surveys when folks spiked. Again, I understand why, and I understand the intent of that probably was not nursing homes like A.G. Rhodes. But I'll tell you, it sure does take a lot of resources out of you while you're trying to deal with COVID, you have a state surveyor in your building overseeing what you do. We got a deficiency. This is not a lie. If I lie, I die. We got a deficiency at our Wesley Woods home for the housekeeper sprayed either Lysol or Clorox, one of those chemical sprays, on an area. And the surveyor went up to him and questioned him on what the dry time was on that chemical. And some of you would know what that means, what the dry time is. I'm yet to know what the dry times are. We got a citation and a fine from the government because that housekeeper, who is the best housekeeper in that home, does his job day in, day out, got a fine for that. That makes a very difficult environment to operate in. Fast forward to now, fast forward to today. Okay, new nursing home requirements, 5-star system, looking at weekend staffing and staffing ratios. Now, well, it's going to be bad. It's not, now we don't have staff. Now is not the time to regulate that. That's a setup. Going back to the practical things we could do, I think if we look back more closely now, the speed with which we lock down would probably be turned. I do think we needed to lock down. I think that the speed of it could have probably been done differently. We could have done it more slowly. And then the big one that we touched on before, I think, and I will credit the government here for the stimulus programs and stuff, but I think pay and programs directly to direct care staff, incentivizing direct care staff is huge. On your question of where we go in the future, I think incentivizing of nursing homes that are willing to have more private rooms would be bigger. Some could probably turn semis into privates if it would make sense financially as a business model to do. So there's a lot of lessons. I'm proud of the book because I think I spent a lot of time. I think it's my best chapter in the book was Out of the Ashes, Build Back Better, which is the last chapter, because that for me is some of the things that I think we could do as a roadmap to improve. And we have and we've done it, so going back to the institutional design of our nursing homes, I say one of the parts I left out of the book, I only say a piece of it, but I say that, we find ways to build new stadiums and domes. I remember Georgia Dome. Georgia Dome was a perfectly good stadium that wasn't even paid for yet. We broke it down and we built the Mercedes Stadium, and taxpayers helped pay for it and are helping pay for it. So because of public-private ventures, which is great, but I think if we could be that industrious in our thinking, we could come up with a solution for nursing homes. The part I left out of the book was we built a wall. If we could be that industrious, our governmental folks, to find funds to build a wall protecting our borders. I get it. But if we could be that industrious, then we could also be a little industrious with our nation's nursing homes and how we deal and care for those. We find ways, and tremendous amounts of money, billions of dollars of money right here in Atlanta is rallied yearly in finding a cure for Alzheimer's and dementia, right? A speck of that is spent on caring for people living with Alzheimer's dementia. And they've gotten zero on that investment, zero on that $1 billion investment in finding a cure, zero.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great wrap up. And also, we want to cut you loose and let you go because you always, you want to stop when people want more, right? So if you answer everything, then that's good because we want people to go and hear your 4 opportunities to make a difference that's at the end of the book. So you have to read the book, right? Or maybe we have a book club.
We need a book club.
Yeah. But Deke, thank you so much. This has been awesome. It's always great to hear from you and see you, and you can hang if you want to, but we need just a few minutes to kind of wrap up, let everybody in on everything. And
I'll hang. I just want to say one thing while I have the opportunity, because I'm seeing some of it in the chat. So a lot of this book is about my team and my staff, my team who are on this call. Guys, thank you all for everything you guys are continuing to do during this. Would never be able to make it up to you, but thank you all for what you all continue to do every day and for making me look good every day as well.
Well, that's not hard. So thank you. All right. So Kim, tell us.
Yes, so that was amazing. So we know as soon as, if you haven't already, everybody go to Amazon and get your book, figure out how to set up maybe some book clubs in your organization. That's such a great idea. Have everybody in your management team read it, discuss it together. We need to just keep bringing Deke's ideas and leadership forward every way that we can. So now I want to we want to share with you all some news. And let me see, let me switch back and get to the right screen. Sorry about that. I'm manipulating some interesting screens right now, Walter. I apologize. Is that correct? Can you see
the book?
It?
There's the book.
Okay, so everybody make sure you jump on Amazon. And now I want to just fill you in on where we are with Culture Change Network of Georgia and Georgia State. You all are aware, most of you, that we had a 3-year CMP grant to bring person-centered care resources to Georgia's nursing homes. And that's wrapping up, but we want to, update you. We created an educational series called Culture Change Matters for the nursing homes. And it's 2 modules for supervisory staff and 3 modules for direct care and support associates. And we've piloted it with 2 nursing homes. We've added an onboarding version, and we have an online home for it, and we'll be kicking this off and really launching it, introducing it next month at the Georgia Healthcare Association Winter Convention, and we're just really excited about it, aren't we, Walter?
Yeah.
So that's coming. And we have a new CMP grant. Our new 3-year CMP grant is a trauma-informed approach to improving dementia care in Georgia's nursing homes. And we're thrilled with this. We're going to be focusing on first the collective trauma that everyone has experienced because of COVID. So we've already started doing some of that focus. Please save the date, March the 3rd, from 2 until 3, there'll be a webinar on collective trauma and supportive supervision. We've already had one in the past, and we'll be posting it and sending information out about it so that people can go and watch it if they missed it. And for nursing home folks, these will be, you'll be able to get CEUs for these, and we'll be sending out information about all of this. So be on the lookout for these. This one is with Jen and her colleague, our colleague who's working with us on the grant, Leanne Royster from Duke, and she's wonderful. And then letting everybody know that as part of this new 3-year grant, we are able to offer one certified EDEN associate training every year, and we're offering one Dementia Beyond Drugs class every year. So we are so excited to be able to do that. And you all have already heard all about the certified EDEN associate class, but save the dates. We have seats for nursing home staff, and we're really hoping that people will send a team, including leadership, and not just managers, but leadership, right, Walter?
Leaders throughout the organization, right? Because we want all staff members should be acting and serving as leaders throughout the whole organization. So this is a really great opportunity. And on the website, the application to reserve your seat, we can't say for a scholarship because we can't use the S word, but we can say the application to reserve your seat is there. So, and those come directly to me. So I'm going to be looking forward to seeing those. And we need, it's for stakeholders tied to nursing homes. So it doesn't have to be just staff. We really need ombudsman. We've really done a lousy job of getting ombudsman certified. And it's just ridiculous in a state like Georgia that's so forward thinking that we can't get the ombudsman connected, but you can through your local nursing homes and people that you know in nursing centers. Everybody is assigned an ombudsman, and they need to go through this. The ones that do, just, it blows them out of the water. But surveyors, family members, you probably have a great family member advocate, even a resident themselves. So any stakeholder. So the way this is designed and being online is just beautiful because it's only 1.5 hours a week. So staff that are direct care and associates in any level, you can cover for them to be a part of a team to get this certification. So we need to do it. Also, we've worked with EDEN where we get a discounted rate. So of course, everybody's not connected to a nursing home. This grant just happens to be through CMS, but there's a reduced rate for anybody in Georgia in any position doing anything can get the Culture Change Network of Georgia reduced rate. So it's going to be really great. We know that we'll have a huge group this time. The other thing that we're doing, Kim, is I just wanted to mention about the Dementia Beyond Drugs is Kim and I are working with EDEN staff to get this curriculum fixed so it can be done online. So we're very excited about that. We'll be offering that starting in August. And so it's 6 weeks. So we're paring it down. So 2 hours for 6 weeks. And I just have to tell you, looking at this again with EDEN staff and going through this curriculum, it's just one of the best things I ever seen. And that's what we talked about with Deke, went through that when we were doing all this face-to-face. But the way the curriculum was written and the way it unfolds is it's just fantastic. So we really need to make sure people take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And again, teams, part of what we all have to do is focus on dementia supporting our loved ones, our friends, our residents with dementia, and teaching people how to move beyond antipsychotics. And with Dementia Beyond Drugs, it adds a whole nother way to think about that, and focuses on the well-being of the people living with dementia. So it's just
Fantastic.
Phenomenal. It's fabulous. And then the next Eden Associate and Friends meetings, we've got quarterly. Just you can save the dates. We'll send out these dates and the key information to you all who joined us today. And then we'll be having a summit, hopefully, in person. We'll see on Wednesday, August the 31st. And then please just make sure that you connect with us on our website. Sign up for the newsletter to make sure you're on the list. And that's where we send out updates and information. And we're very, very active on Facebook. And we're working on the other ones. But we just reached 1,003 likes. So we're really excited about that. And then we also have the little videos that we made in the first CMP grant, and you all can find those on Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, they are organized by theme. So there are like themes with a playlist, and it's a really great resource. So if you haven't looked at that, please do.
And those social media videos, they're incredible. And Kim's put them on playlist. And we're getting calls from people all over the world, but especially in the US. And these are people like my 70-year-old cousin in Oregon has a book club. And she said, we just realized we're all old and we really want to prepare and we want to know more about aging. So, can you call us once a week, and tell us stuff? And I'm like, no, but there's social media videos and they're all over them. So even like in your local congregations, it would be so cool if you, as kind of the professional in the field of aging, just say, let me put something in the church bulletin about this playlist. I mean, it is a huge gift. And I can tell you, the team that put these together when we worked on these, they're fantastic. They couldn't be better. I mean, it's a great free resource, and it really educates. And so we need to take advantage of all the tools we have, and that's a huge one.
We have Rosemarie Fagan and Joan Carlson on this call. We had Jen Kraft Morgan on this call. We are so fortunate to have an excellent, amazing team, and we're thrilled that we get to keep working together for another 3 years, as well as with all of you, our amazing colleagues. I believe that is all, unless anybody has something else to add.
That was a lot of great information. Wow, what a great time.
Deke,
so thanks to Eden staff, thanks to our Spanish colleagues, and thanks to, so great to see all the Georgia folks.
And
everybody's looking good.
And everybody who helped us share and promote this, getting the word out so we could all hear from Deke.